first, I connected the CRM and realized that there was real freaking leads happening. Now I'm going into analytics and saying, where are ChatGPT, Perplexity, and Gemini driving traffic to my website? Okay. Then I'm looking at what pages are they driving to, because the page tells you a lot more about the query, because there's no data. You can't get data out of Perplexity. You can't get data out of ChatGPT. You can't get it out of Gemini. So there is no like, oh, I can kind of go into the webmaster tools and see you're getting zero data.
Welcome to the Agents of Change, the podcast experience you've been waiting for your entire marketing career. Search, social, mobile, AI, blockchain, and neuromarketing. These are the Agents of Change, and so are you. Digital marketing success awaits, and your transformation begins now.
Welcome to another episode of the Agents of Change podcast. I'm your host, Rich Brooks. This is episode 560, powered by Flight New Media. Today, we have an incredible episode for anyone who's trying to understand the impact that AI is having on search and how to drive more qualified leads from AI tools like ChatGPT, Perplexity, and Gemini. Now, this is a question that I'm fielding a lot, and while the answers are still developing, still percolating, it's people like today's guests that are giving us some insight into how we mere mortals can start to take advantage of these shifts in search. I'm recording this intro from my home office here in Maine. That's right, I am finally back home after a full month on the road. I think it was 31 days, door to door. We first spent 3.5 weeks in Puerto Rico, sightseeing, visiting friends, and actually working remotely. I even recorded a segment for 207, which is the evening news program on the NBC affiliates here in Maine, on how to make the most out of working remotely and as a digital nomad. Then it was off to Vegas, where I got to speak at the Fathom Summit about AI and real estate. No, not that Fathom, not the Fathom, which is my favorite AI note taker, but Fathom Realty. It was really fun. It was a great engaged audience. We had a blast. I even had time to take in a Cirque du Soleil show at the MGM Grand called Ka, which was just amazing. Highly recommended. But now I am back in Maine where it's 40 degrees and I'm having a little bit of temperature whiplash. Still, there's no place like home, and I can't wait to get back into the office next week. But in the meantime, here's this week's interview. My next guest is the founder and CEO of Seer Interactive, one of the most highly regarded digital marketing agencies in the U.S. A former teacher with a knack for advising, he is passionate about helping people and businesses grow. He's been helping Fortune 500 companies develop SEO and digital marketing strategies since 1999. He's a sought-after keynote speaker, averaging 10 to 20 keynotes every year. I had the pleasure of finally seeing him speak live at MACON this past September. Blew me away. His profound knowledge and practical approach towards SEO, PPC, and digital strategy have made him a revered speaker and consultant in our industry. He started Seer Interactive back in 2002 after his boss wouldn't let him volunteer on his lunch break. A philanthropist at heart, he had the first few Seer team members sign contracts committing to giving back to the community. Today, we're going to be looking at the impact that AI is having on your search traffic and what, if anything, you can do about it with Wil Reynolds. Wil, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me today. This is going to be a fun topic.
I'm excited about it. Now, as I mentioned in your bio, volunteerism is a central belief at Seer. Would you mind telling me a little bit about what you're doing at the Covenant House Sleep Out this November?
Yeah, so this November, in about 3.5 weeks, me and a few team members will be sleeping outside at a church with a bunch of other companies and their teams to raise money and awareness for homeless youth in our city. It is my 13th or 14th time doing this. I live in Philly, so it's cold out there. But what warms you up are the stories of the perseverance and resilience of our youth. So anytime I can get out there and try to raise money and awareness for this issue, it is a great use of me and my team's time.
That's awesome. I love how you made this such a big part of your business as well. If people want to learn more about it, or if they want to donate to the cause, is there a link that you can give us?
Yeah, I'll definitely give you the link. You can put it in the show notes.
Perfect.
Because it's like a long link, of course, nonprofits.
Sure.
Like, can't we get some Bitleys up in this piece?
Exactly.
But no, so I will. I'll send that on for sure. And just today, I recorded a video. I had a couple people hit me up, and they're like, "We'll donate to your sleep out to the tune of $1,500 if you'll spend an hour with our team." So I'm like, "Cool, let me do like 10 of those." So I'm gonna also be posting a link today that's basically like, "Look, if somebody hears this and is like, we like the way you're thinking about AI. I want you to come in for an hour." I'm like, "It's a write-off. Donate the $1,500 to my sleep out, and you'll get me for an hour to talk to your team one-on-one about whatever it is that you want to talk about."
Love it. Awesome. All right. We'll have those links in the show notes. So let's shift now. Talking about AI, what's the shift that you've seen in how consumers are getting answers to queries these days on the internet?
The volume is low. The impact is high for me. So what I'm finding is a lot of people are showing the traffic numbers from ChatGPT, Perplexity, et cetera. And they're going, look how small the number is. And it's like, well, one, if you compare ChatGPT to Google, keep in mind that their goal is not to send people to your website. One, right? So if they can give you the answer right there, they're going to give you the answer. So you shouldn't expect those things to line up. Duh. That's the first thing. The second thing is that my quality of conversions are a lot higher. So I've got like a couple $100,000 in pipeline, actual converted people, MQLs that came from ChatGPT. And when I compare my number of MQLs that came from search that wasn't branded against my number of leads that came from ChatGPT over the last 3 months, it's like a third of my non-branded leads are coming from ChatGPT/AI, not from Google. So, it's like the numbers on traffic might look low, but the impact and the lead flow, at least as a B2B, is high enough for me to get really serious about this.
Okay, so some basic questions here. So first, if some of the listeners are here and hearing what you're saying and they're getting excited about this, simply how are you seeing in Google Analytics or any other tool that you're using that this traffic that is converting is coming through these AI tools like ChatGPT or Perplexity rather than Google or social media?
It's my CRM. I'm a CEO. At the end of the day, I don't look into Google Analytics to see how my company's doing. I look at my CRM. I'm looking at pipeline, looking at real business, right? Not this like, oh, somebody refreshed the form twice, so now it looks like I have 2 leads. I'm not about that. Neither is any other CEO. Who's got to make real decisions. So inside of my CRM, we changed our drop down to include ChatGPT/AI. And once we did that, we're actually able to track those users through the buying journey. Are they MQLs? Are they not? So when I separated out all the places that people may go to get answers, you're pretty much going to Google or Bing or DuckDuckGo for search, where you're querying something, not like Reddit or any of that stuff. Or you're going to end up on a chat search engine. When I look at the traffic, it's like 7% to 1.5%. When I looked at my conversions over the last 3 months that were MQLs, it was like 32% for ChatGPT, 78% or so, or 68% for Google. So I'm like, all right, that's enough actual leads coming in from my lead form where people are saying that I'm not going to look at the traffic numbers as my decision on how much I should jump in or not. I'm going to look at the quality of leads that are coming in.
All right. So the number of leads coming in through or the traffic coming in through ChatGPT may be a small amount, but that is just much higher quality is what you're telling us, right?
For my business.
So for your business, obviously your mileage may vary at home, but
your mileage may vary at home, but because so many people want this, like, it's funny, man. We've gotten lazy in marketing. It's like people want the answer. And I'm like, I'm not here to give you the answer because you have to do the work to look into the data yourself to determine, is my customer there? Is it a high quality customer there? Is it just sales guys looking for a list of leads and are getting links clicking on my website? Like, you got to do the work yourself, because what I'm afraid of is a lot of people may overinvest in AI because it's the new hotness and then realize that not enough of their customers are there. And now they've overinvested in something when they should have just been doing mostly Google and just a little bit of AI. I think too many people might come in too early.
All right. So if we've done the homework and we do believe that AI is driving traffic to our website or could be driving traffic to our website, what are some of the steps we could take to improve the opportunities we have of ChatGPT or similar services sending us traffic? What did you do once you started to see this uptick to increase the chances of you filling your pipeline?
Nothing yet. So people are very surprised when I say this. It's like, I'm not putting the cart before the horse. You can't optimize something that you're not tracking and baselining yet. So here's been my workflow. First, I connected the CRM and realized that there was real freaking leads happening. Now I'm going into analytics and saying, where are ChatGPT, Perplexity, and Gemini driving traffic to my website? Okay. Then I'm looking at what pages are they driving to? Because the page tells you a lot more about the query because there's no data. You can't get data out of Perplexity. You can't get data out of ChatGPT. You can't get it out of Gemini. So there is no like, oh, I can kind of go into the webmaster tools and see you're getting zero data. So for me, it's very important to figure out what pages they're driving to. So if I'm getting a bunch of traffic to my blog, that's way different than to my homepage or my services pages. And I was shocked to see how much ChatGPT is driving to my services pages and my homepage. I think it's like 70% of the traffic I get from ChatGPT is to my homepage and my services pages. Very little of it's my blog. For me, that's a good thing because who the heck is getting, like, why go to my homepage? Like, you're only going to my homepage if you're looking for my brand, which means you were referred and somebody said, oh, talk to Seer Interactive, and you Googled it and came into my homepage, or you did it on ChatGPT. No, sorry. If you Google it, you're going to get my brand direct. If you're on ChatGPT looking for a company that does blah, 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 they're going to send you to my homepage, not a blog page, right? So I think the pages that people are driving to is the next thing you got to look at. Once you do that, the next thing you've got to do is benchmark whether or not you're showing up. Because people want to jump to how do I show up? And it's like, you got to actually, we're getting close to a point where you're going to almost be at like a query volume of 1, right? Like everybody can personalize the query so much that you got to start to look at how are people searching in ChatGPT. So when you do get those leads, call those people and ask them what they were searching for. Because you got to try to get in the mind of the searcher better. Like, how long was your query? How many words did you type? How long were you typing? What kind of refinements did you do? Once you get all that, now you can start to put in, for me, it's going to be a couple thousand questions into a tool like ZipTie, or we have our own tool that we've built to then track how visible I am for those words. And then once you know how visible you are for these queries, then you can begin the process of optimizing, which I can start to lay out my playbook for you on that, because I just started doing it about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. Started saying, now that I got all those steps in place, now I'm ready to talk a little bit about what I'm going to do, but I haven't done it yet.
Tease us a little bit. Give us just a little taste of what you're starting on right now, because I'm totally curious.
Yeah, so it's not going to be very sexy. Remember, well, most people weren't around for what SEO looked like from 1999-ish to probably about like 2008 or 2009. So remember, we had like a 10-year run on SEO of literally like doing stuff that wasn't very advanced and winning. And I think the more niche you are, the easier it is to get away with some of those things. So the first thing I'm thinking of is I looked at, it's good for me to talk this out because I can walk people through my methodology. So they're not just like, wow, this guy just made this shit up. Because everybody's making shit up right now. Everybody's a goddamn AI expert, right? So what I did is I looked at all of the documentation from Perplexity, Microsoft, Anthropic, and OpenAI on how to prompt their search engine or their AI, their generative AI bots. Because these bots don't come with any instructions. There's no rules. So what they realized is if people get bad answers, they're going to blame the LLM, not themselves, for not knowing how to search. So therefore, when you read their instructions, you can see they're oftentimes saying, give yourself a role, give yourself an industry, blah, 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 blah. And if you look closely on Perplexity and Copilot, they will start to auto-populate and auto-fill out the rest of your query to help you get a better query and a better prompt, to help you get better answers. So now I'm going, all right, well, how are they, what are they recommending in their documentation? They're saying you should put in your role. Great. So that means that somebody's going to put in, I'm a CMO, I'm a CFO, I'm a marketing VP, right? So then you got to look back at your content and go, how often am I writing content that is broken down by role? So my first thing I'm going to start to do is look at content that we've written that has already performed really well. So I know that people like it and care about it, and start to divide it up on role, right? How to look at your KPIs in an AI world for the CMO is a different post. So what I'm doing is I'm taking all my posts around KPIs and AI, I'm loading them all into ChatGPT, I'm going for a run, and I'm using the voice. The new voice version is so freaking dope that I'm using the voice version to just answer questions. So I'm having it be an interviewer. I'm having ChatGPT be an interviewer, asking me all these tough questions about like what the CMO would care about and guiding me into like CMO style questions. And then by the time I'm done my run and get home, all my answers in my own voice as an SME, not some delve in an ever evolving landscape type crap they're going to write up for me. It's my actual quotes, my actual voice, my actual tone is kind of already written up. So then I just go, all right, put it all together in a post, maintaining my quotes, my tone, my this. And now I've got probably like 60, 70% started on how to pivot it into the CMO. And I'm basically doing the same thing for industry. So then I'm saying, all right, where do we excel as a company? We're strong in a few areas, SaaS, healthcare, education, let's just say, and banking. So now I'm going, oh, when I type those words in, monitoring, I'm looking for an SEO and a paid search firm good at banking industry. I'm not coming up as the answer. I'm going, but I got tremendous experience there. So then I'm like, all right, where are my case studies? Am I going to start speaking at conferences in those spaces? Awards I started noticing were showing up as sources for a lot of answers on Gemini. So then you start going like, okay, if I want to win in education, how do I pivot my existing content around education? How do I get my people speaking at education conferences? When we do those conferences, shouldn't we do some PR around those conferences and saying, hey, press release, we're going here, here's our ba. And then let's also make sure we have some case studies so that we can build these verticalized pages. So the first thing that I'm doing is I'm beginning the process of building verticalized pages and vertical by industry and by role, because that's where we're seeing the documentation telling us how we should be prompting to get the most out of it.
Will, that is so next level. That is amazing. Are you, when you're doing this and you're slicing and dicing this content for the different audiences or the different industries, are you leaving the original page behind? Like, are you leaving it there, or are you updating the content for those pages? I mean, it sounds like if you want to have one piece of content that's for the CMO versus, say, the CEO or some other role, that really should be two separate pages. And similarly, certainly for the industries, it seems like it should be separate as well.
So I don't know how this is going to pan out. I've thought about like including like a 5 minute, like the 1 minute CMO like box at the top of a post to just feed it a little bit. But I'm finding that like, because that's, the attention span. You don't have as much time with somebody as they move up in the C-suite. So I've played around with that idea. But then I've also been like, I go on these long runs and I'm like giving it a bunch of stuff. It's hard to get it down into the 1 minute version. So I'm thinking of doing is like, there's an education company that does this really well. They go, I am a blank and I'm trying to do X. And they basically are like, what's your growth goal and what's your role? And I'm thinking if I can get people to identify their role early on, then I can have them click over to a new page is what I'm thinking. That's like, all right, here are like a bunch of like 5 minute snippets on blah, 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 blah for the CMO. And then I get to also, if they self-select in, now my HubSpot can tell what their role is. So then imagine trying to personalize the rest of their experience because there's a value in them giving me that information because the rest of their experience will be personalized that way. But I don't have the content written that way yet. So I'm going through, working my tail off, trying to like go through my old posts and asking ChatGPT to interview me so I can just like get it out at times that would otherwise be dead time, like a long run or something like that.
So I just want to envision this. So you basically are having these conversations and they're being recorded while you're running because ChatGPT is interviewing you, and then that becomes the content. Like you said, 60 to 70% of the post is done right then, and then you just refine it once you get back to the office.
That's correct.
Brilliant. Let's talk about some other things, because this has been mind-blowing for me, but I did want to touch base on a few things, because I think a lot of people are worried that their search traffic is going down. I see this across the industries. I've heard a lot of concerns from people like, I'm just not getting the search traffic I used to get. What do you tell your clients when they start saying that we're not getting the search traffic that we experienced before?
I go and look at leads. So are leads dropping at the same level as your search traffic? And then I look at revenue. And I say, if you can give me those by month, then I can overlay that to see, is this a major problem? And for some clients, they line up. For other clients, they don't line up at all. Like for me, I'm down 40, I'm starting to come back a little bit. But at one point, I was down 41% over where I was January 2022.
For search traffic.
For search traffic. But my revenue, my lead flow was the same, and my revenue was up 2%. So what that told me is like, back in the day, search traffic used to be a good proxy for me of my business's health. Now I'm realizing that's not as much as I once thought it was. So that's the way I'm looking at that.
Do you think it's because a lot of the searches that AI is answering right now are these kind of low quality informational searches like when is Mother's Day 2025 or, when is Rosh Hashanah or whatever it may be. And we're just not going to see traffic like that. Traffic is gone forever.
You know what? I think it starts basic, but we're used to losing that traffic because that traffic's already been mostly lost. I had a client in the greeting card space for the last 10 years, and you could just watch over time. Like the answer boxes destroyed those kind of answers, right? Before you could
Right.
rank for Valentine's Day. What day is Valentine's Day? Number one. The answer box came in. The customer got what they needed. Why would they click on your site? So I think we're used to those queries. I think the thing that we're not used to is when somebody types in a very long query. Like, hey, I'm a 200 person B2B SaaS company. I have offices in X locations. I have this many salespeople. Here's what I'm struggling with my sales team. Which three CRMs would you recommend? I think people are not ready for that. Like that is once you have that experience one time and you're like, wait a second, what just happened? I didn't have to Google something to then click on a bunch of results, many of which those paid search answers are dog shit, right? They're not actually close to what you actually wanted. So then I had to go through that friction. Then I got to get to a bunch of websites that also have their pop-ups and all the stuff they want me to do before I get the answer. There's just so much friction between your question and the answer. And we just got used to it because it was so much better than the encyclopedia. But now it's like, wait a second, like I can avoid all that and I can put in 8 different things that I'm looking for in one long query instead of, okay, CRM for SaaS. And then you're like, okay, cool. CRM that auto updates from email. Good. CRM that integrates with Gmail. You have to do so much work and then go through that same cycle of bullshit, that same cycle of friction with every query. You're like, well, I already knew what I wanted in my head. If I just could have talked it all out in a paragraph, I wouldn't have had to do these 20 different searches and click on all these different websites with their own UX and UI. I'm trying to figure out their navigation. I'm clicking on paid ads and I can't really tell where the paid ads are versus the organic. The whole process of getting people from question to answer in an AI world is just like, oh, is that what it feels like when the friction's removed? So I think that that's where people are going to see traffic dropping over time. And remember how we opened up. My CRM is telling me that that's happening. I'm getting leads coming through, MQLs coming through, not just tire kickers, like real quality folks coming through saying, yeah, I use ChatGPT to find you guys.
And are you seeing, as you look at your own analytics, that maybe the traffic to your blogs and the informational posts are getting less traffic, but the service pages and the sales pages are continuing at pretty much the same rate or even improving?
Oh, you just gave me something to look at. So the blog for sure. The blog for sure. Although, it's interesting. I don't think it's it's 41%. So that's pretty bad, quote unquote. But ultimately, I think if you're writing really short posts that don't give a lot of additional context, then yeah, the answer can be answered in a box. But sometimes, if you're writing a longer post and you're trying to understand the pros, the cons, the nuances, etc., I find that a lot of times people are going to have to click through anyway, at least on like a perplexity and whatnot. So we'll see about that. What I haven't looked at is how often does Google drive direct traffic to my services pages. I have looked at it for ChatGPT. I have not looked at it for Google because I'm like, yeah, Google's just going to typically rank my homepage for everything. So now I want to look at how many people directly came into my services pages from Google versus how many people came directly into my services pages from Gemini, Perplexity, and ChatGPT. So that's a good one. I'm going to take a look at that.
Yeah, I give a hot hat tip to Andy Crestodina on that, who also spoke at MACON and is a good friend of mine. And he was showing me that his blog posts don't get the traffic it used to, but the traffic to his service pages and the branded content is just as good. And it sounds like you, has not seen a dip in sales because of it. So that actually brings up an important point. You in your presentation talk about the importance of brands and that brands matter when it comes to SEO. Can you kind of explain why you think that?
Yeah. So, man, I think that Google has overdialed domain authority, right? So, there's a time now where every time you Google anything, you're going to see Reddit, right? High domain authority. So there's these websites that are showing up. You're watching people buy domains with high authority, right? People like Red Ventures or whatever. They're buying these really like high brand domains like CNET, or you just saw it with like Forbes. Forbes was building whole sections of their website that had nothing to do with business news. It was low quality affiliate stuff for buying like box fans. And Google just gave them the slap. And a lot of other sites like that, the slap. And I think what happens is Google has overweighted domains and the authority of the brand domain for so long that now users and customers are getting more friction than ever because they're like, why would I go to Forbes for these things? The beauty is that in an LLM world, these generative AI bots, they see your brand and they see the words that are around your brand very well. So it's much harder to fake it. Whereas I can take a big domain today. I was just doing this with a gene search. I was showing people like the search phrase ethical jeans, or I'm looking for like ethical denim, whatever, right? Shockingly, Banana Republic shows up on the first page of Google. Now, that is the kind of thing, if I'm at Banana Republic, that would scare me because I know that when you think of Banana Republic, you say, what's Banana Republic all about? You're like, I don't know, right? But it's definitely not environmental friendly denim and environmentally friendly practices. That's not the core of their brand. There's a bunch of denim brands. That is the core of their brand. And I show the audience how Banana Republic is able to rank for these keywords because of their domain authority. So if I worked at Banana Republic today, I would be finding where are we punching above our weight because of our domain authority in Google? How much traffic is that? How much conversions is that? Because in an LLM world, unless we actually do real marketing and real PR saying that we're that company and we do real shit, there's a good chance that we will no longer show up. So as our customers start to move over into this new world, it's going to double hit us because we kind of got away with building out pages that weren't really what we were about. Do we have jeans? Yes. Are we about ethically friendly jeans? Not really, but our domain authority has allowed us to show up. So I think that that's another thing that I'm just looking forward to with these LLMs. You're just going to do some real freaking marketing, some real PR, have a real freaking brand that has real beliefs, real brand beliefs. And otherwise, I think you're going to have a harder time showing up.
That makes sense. One of the other things that I loved from your presentation is this idea of social bangers and how you're using social bangers to really drive qualified traffic to the website. Can you just walk us through that, please?
Yeah. So it's actually a presentation I'm working on right now. And, so much of how I've come up with this stuff was from me losing team members on marketing and not being given budget to replace them. So then I started having to be like, all right, my traffic is dropping. I got nobody to really run marketing. It was about a 6-month stint while I was running it. And one of the things I started to realize is, yes, my search traffic is dropping, but I was remotivated to start to get my ideas out in the world a little bit. And I started writing and posting more. And I started watching the social traffic on the days that I was posting just going through the roof. And I'm like, okay. So then it made me start to think when I I might get 900 visitors in a month from LinkedIn. Okay. I'm getting 35,000 from Google. So it's another place where you're like, is it really worth it? Like, it's so much more time to write these posts. And remember, they spike and then they go away.
Right.
So it's a lot of work to get a one-time hit, which I think is another thing about repurposing and distribution. But it's a lot of work to get that one-time hit. You know what's so much better? Writing a post one time and just letting it rank forever and just getting all that traffic. However, what I started realizing when I stopped looking at traffic and I started looking at newsletter signups, it was the post that came from social where humans actually with their fingers clicked, liked, commented, reshared, tagged in friends. So you knew that whatever I wrote that day, humans cared, not a proxy for humans, not an algorithm. Right. Real humans saw it and said, this is good. So then you start watching these social things start to take off and you're going, okay, every time we write one of those posts, they get significantly less traffic, but significantly more people signing up for the newsletter. So then you have to start to think about the whole way you're valuing your social channel, because if you value a visit from SEO the same way you value a visit from social, you're probably going to undervalue social and not invest in it the right way, an organic social. So what I'm doing is I'm saying, I believe that a social visitor is worth 4x what a search visitor is. And I'm saying that a newsletter sign up to me is worth, let's just say it's $500. So now when I layer in those numbers against the search numbers, I can take a post that's got 30,000 visits to one post and beat it with a social post that only had 900 visits. Because it's like, like 1 out of every 50 people that got to this, or 1 out of every 10 people that got to it, signed up for the newsletter. Well, when you start adding those in, it's different. Those visitors also got exposure to our brand, right? A lot of times this search crap, like the content is so similar to each other that your brand never stands out. Right. So it's like, I can just Google this word and it doesn't matter whose site I really click on because they've all kind of followed each other's template.
Right. So I never remember which recipe site I go to.
You know what? I'm stealing that. Right. I have zero. That's a really good one. I have zero affiliation to recipe sites. You know why? Because I just Google it. Whoever gives me a good enough answer gave me a good enough answer.
Right.
If somebody gave you an answer that was really different and really valuable and really good, you might be like, you know what, when I see their domain, I'm going to click on it more often. The problem is they've all followed each other down the same path with the big paragraphs of content about their grandma and the smell of apple pie before they actually get to what I'm trying to get to, because they prioritized the revenue over the relationship with the customer. So once you see the customer as a commodity for you to get cash, you're not going to invest in building out a community. And now they're like, oh my God, like people are going to LLMs and typing in what's in their fridge. And why would they ever visit my website? You're like, right, because you've been destroying the customer experience for so long, the chickens came home to roost.
If you just bought the domain justrecipes.com, which I'm sure is not available, and all you did is just literally get people what they wanted, you probably would build your subscriber base 10x, 100x. So I watched your presentation. I'm listening to you right now. And one of the things I've noticed is that, especially in the presentation, you use the word intuition a lot. And as I'm talking to you now and I see the gears move when I say something or you say something, and you realize you have this a gift, I would say, of just starting to put things together and thinking about things in a new way. I know you used to be a teacher. I love the way your brain seems to work, at least from this perspective. How do you develop your intuition? How do you start to ask the questions that get you answers that I'm not seeing other SEOs ask or answer? And that may be a kind of esoteric question, but I'm super curious about it.
It's a really hard question to answer because it's my natural flow state, but I have had to do the work to try to understand parts of it. So we'll just edit this down if we have to, because there might be like spots where I pause a bit to get the right words, because I'm not oftentimes asked that question, but I have done a lot of reflection on it. One, I have a hypothesis before I do anything. So a lot of people Google shit, or they search for shit, or they go to ChatGPT and type shit in. Every time I type something in, I have a hypothesis about what I'm going to see. What happens is over time, you start to get a feel for how good your gut is. You're like, oh, all right, I believed that this search result would look like this. I do what probably is like, I probably do 1,000 Google searches a week. Imagine doing that for 20 years. And every time you do it, you're trying to be like, I bet you this. So now I can kind of intuit when my gut is off, like, oh, for the last 5 times, I could have sworn I was going to see a result like this, and I didn't see it. Oh, my gut's off there a little bit. I got to research that, right? So there's that. I also think I read a book called Mistakes Were Made, But Not By Me. And that book really helped me to look internally at myself to see, it gives great examples of how people kind of bullshit themselves when they don't like the reality of what's in front of them. And the book is full of those examples. And after reading the book, it caused me to be like, oh, you know what causes a lot of consultants to not full-throatedly kind of lean in is they're like, well, if less people Google and I make my money on Google, then, okay, let me find a new way. So then they don't allow their brain to go to a place where like, what happens if Google doesn't exist? Right? It's like, well, that's how I make my money. So it's like, we're not saying that it's going to go away tomorrow, but like you have to do it's mental gymnastics, right? It's like going to the gym. Let me put my brain through the work of like, where would I go? How would I create value? Like people aren't going to have fewer questions, right? So you do a lot of logic work. You're like, people aren't going to have fewer questions because Google went away. So where might they go? What data might that leave? What kind of trail might that leave? And you just got to have a bunch of people you work around where you can throw these ideas out and they sharpen, steel sharpens steel. So like, I think this is the best time. If it was me, I got asked this question the other day about in-person versus remote on a podcast. And I'm like, this is the best time ever to be around a small group of people trying to hash this shit out, because by its nature, just what you hear someone talk about or do will lead you to be like, oh shit, I didn't think about that way. Yo, can you talk to you about that real quick? And that's just harder to happen when our calls, when you have a Zoom, it's very scheduled. It's very like, okay, here's the agenda. We're going to talk about this report and this and that. But we underestimate how much of what we pick up is through osmosis and hearing other people work through problems while we're working on our own. So, that's the other thing is I just think like I'm lucky that I have a pretty sizable team of people and I can throw shit out and I'm completely open to being challenged on it because that helps me to sharpen my own thinking, right? Versus I think a lot of times when people get to my level, sometimes the assumptions that they're right because they've been right so many times in their career. Whereas like, that's another thing. I try to exit the rooms where everybody's telling me how smart I am because I'm never going to learn anything in that room.
Right.
Right. If you really think about it, right? Like we fish for compliments so hard these days that we forget that like the compliments are good in the sense of they tell you what to repeat. But most people aren't in it for that. I don't really let many people compliment me without me saying to them, like, what did you see that made you say that? Because I want to repeat it. It's data, right? I want to repeat it. Like, I don't want to, oh, you crushed it. You can say to the average person, you crushed it. And they're like, yes, Will said I crushed it. And it's like, well, what exactly did you do how did Will see it? I don't know. It's like, well, then how do you know how to repeat it? I don't know. Whereas I'm more likely when somebody gives me kudos, feedback, good, bad, whatever. I'm like, well, what did you see that made you say that? Oh, okay. I see the connection. So I'm always trying to understand and connect those dots. And I think that's my flow state. And then the cheat code is I have an amazing executive team. So, the other day I was in a meeting with my top 2 execs and they were I was trying to help them out with something. And they're like, we already solved all those problems. And I was like, just sitting there like, oh shit. Like they really don't need me to help them with this problem that they're working on. And I was like, that's amazing. And versus I think, because then I can just stay where I'm strongest and where I help the company the most. Right. But I think a lot of folks struggle with that as leaders, feeling less needed. And I'm like, oh, I'm at my best when nobody needs me, because then I can just focus on where's these things going, because that's my flow state to try to connect these dots.
That's awesome. This has been a great conversation. I appreciate it. And after we get off, I'll be pleased to tell you exactly where I think you crushed it. So, we can talk about that afterwards. Will, if people want to learn more about you, if they want to learn more about SEER, if they want to learn more about the Covenant House, where can we send them?
All right. I think the best place these days is probably LinkedIn. Find me on LinkedIn. That's where I put most of my stuff. I'm on Twitter still a bit. I'm on Threads a little bit. And then you have the SEER Interactive website where we post where I post a bunch of content as well. So those are probably the best places to find me.
Fantastic. And all of those will be in the show notes. Will, thank you so much for your time today. I really enjoyed myself.
No, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it, Rich.
I don't know about you, but my mind is blown and I am so full of ideas that I want to try out right now. Will is the man, right? I've been trying to get him on the podcast for a while, and then when I ran into him at MACON earlier this year, I just knew that this was my opportunity to get him on the show. Luckily, he was incredibly gracious, very kind, very interesting, and he agreed to come on the podcast and share all this great content with us. You may find yourself in a similar boat to me that this episode probably requires more than just one listen. So if you want to hear it again, you can find the entire audio at our website, along with a summary of Will's biggest takeaways, a full transcript, and a whole lot more. Just head on over to theagentsofchange.com/560. And while you're there, don't forget to subscribe and subscribe at your favorite podcasting platform, because we have more great content coming your way that's geared exactly for people like you. People who are agents of change.
Don't miss another thrilling episode of the Agents of Change podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform.